What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, Wolfgang Poker here. And for this episode, we did something different and we did a Zoom call with a poker coach that's been helping me along the way get better. Recently, I've been doing a lot better in my videos. If you guys like this type of content, be sure to let me know down below. Otherwise, I won't keep posting it. But I thought it could be valuable for you guys to see some of the hands that I've played in my vlogs and how he would have played them differently, along with 3 mistakes that he's been watching my videos and seeing me making along the way. So yeah, if you guys get some value out of this, drop a like, subscribe if you're new as always. The next video will be back to a normal vlog, but if you want to check out his course as well, that's helped me get better, there will be a link down in the description with a discount code, so check that out if you want. If not, just enjoy this free content here, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Yo, what's up, you guys? Thanks for tuning back into the channel. We're here with Alvin from Alvin Teaches Poker, aka Overnight Monster Guru. And he's going to help me with 3 specific things that he's already seen from my videos that I need to work on. And stay tuned to the end because he's going to go over my last video from the Wynn, and he's going to dissect a couple of the hands that I butchered in a nice way, but help me get better, which will help you get better as well. So Alvin, thanks for joining me. Let's jump right into it.
Yo, what's going on, Alex? How you doing today, man?
Doing great, doing great.
It's actually really funny because the first time Alex came to me, he's like, yo, man, I got some hands. You want to check them out? I was like, yeah, sure. And the first thing I said to him is, don't take this personally, but I disagree with 99% of your decisions. And he was like, okay, cool, man. I'm here to learn. So we are here to talk about some of those things, right? So let's just jump right into them. The first thing in all of your live games that I want to see you do is when players limp, even when you have hands that are somewhat speculative, I want you to start raising, okay? And there's gonna be a couple of reasons why I want you to raise. So first off, let's say, a couple guys limp and you have a hand like 9-8 suited or 7-6 suited there, and you're on the button or the cutoff. I really want you to go ahead and raise there. One, because it's really important to just go ahead and take the betting lead and be able to represent strength. Because when you get everyone to fold, or if you get one person to call, or even 2 players to call, very often you're going to be able to pick up the flop with just a very small continuation bet. And you know that this is something that is really core to my strategy, is that I really love to keep putting on the pre-flop aggression and then just betting small on an absolute F-ton amount of flops. So being able to keep up the pre-flop aggression gives you access to this ability to just get some guy heads up where you can just pound on him with the itty bitty bets.
Do you want me to, so you're saying like 7-8, like obviously I know the hands that I'm always going to be raising, like from the cutoff button, stuff like that.
Sure.
7-8 suited, 6-7 suited, 9-10 suited. Is that 100% raise on the button there? Or am I picking a frequency, like looking at a clock or something?
Generally when I'm playing live, I think one of the things is I am extraordinarily allergic to seeing a flop, because then I'm gonna have to pay the extraordinarily high rake at the casino. And so I wanted to contort myself into all sorts of maneuvers so I don't have to see flops. So rather than limping, I always want to raise just to give myself the possibility of winning right there so I don't have to pay the rake. Or if I am going to pay the rake, it's often going to be in a really favorable position where I'm going to be playing heads up against, a probably not very good player, assuming that he went ahead and limped, right? So I think that in general, facing a limper, if I was looking at, like if I was on the cutoff and I was looking at my cutoff range, I would probably just open fold some of the worst hands that you would normally raise in that position, but then go ahead and raise all of like the better coordinated suited hands, right? So in the cutoff, if you're normally raising a hand like ace-8 offsuit or ace-9 offsuit and there's a limper, yeah, you can go ahead and fold those hands. But if you have ace-2, king-4 suited, 6-5 suited, 10-8 suited, all of those are going to be raises, even when there are 2 players if you have position.
Okay, and you like the 3x plus like an x for every limper typically?
Yeah, probably 4x plus 1 for every limper. Not because that's what a solver is going to recommend, but merely because your opponents are going to be so bad that inflating the pot when you play pots with them is going to be good, because then you just pick up slightly larger pots against them than average than you should.
And that's in position to say, like, I'm coming in from the small blind or the big blind. I would probably want to make it even bigger to
Yeah, you'd probably just go ahead and make it one big blind larger. But because you're in the big blind and you have the option of just like checking a bunch of those hands, you can just go ahead and check those hands, right? So like if I have a hand like 6-4 suited or 7-5 suited, in position, sometimes I might think about raising those to isolate players. But if I'm in the big blind now, I can just go ahead and call those hands, right? And just like limp along. And so generally when I'm limping out of the big blind, or when I'm raising out of the big blind, my hand's going to be a little bit stronger than average. And so because it's a little bit stronger than average, if I add that one big blind, it's going to be, perfectly fine from like a theoretical perspective.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So making sure that you keep on the pressure. And this kind of actually leads into, I think, what is your second biggest leak, right? This is the first thing that I sat down and I said, okay, cool. We need to completely cut this out of your game and your win rate's just going to skyrocket. And that is cold calling pre-flop, right? So anytime a player is raising and you want to play a pot with them and you are not in the big blind, you're only going to be 3-bet or folding pre-flop, right? This is mostly to avoid rake, right? Because again, the rake is just so high. 2, right? We've talked about it's really, really effective to go ahead and take the betting lead and just put on a lot of aggression on the flop, and a lot of the overwhelming majority of players up to probably 5, 10, or 10, 20 live simply cannot deal with that very, very basic strategy. It seems to be like the largest open secret in the poker community. Everyone knows about this strategy, but no one seems to be able to beat it, right? So being able to consistently just put on that pressure is going to be really, really powerful. And then also, if you're consistently re-raising against your opponent with your entire range, it gives you the ability to kind of have a disguised hand, right? So if the cutoff raises and I'm on the button, if I have pocket aces, I go ahead and 3-bet those. If I have a hand like ace 10 suited, gonna go ahead and 3-bet that. If I have a hand like pocket sixes, still gonna be going ahead and 3-betting that, right? Like 50% of the time. And so if I'm 3-betting all of these hands and not splitting my range into some hands call and some hands re-raise, it's much harder to read my hand, because like if I sometimes call and you can say, oh wow, he always has like suited connectors and small and weak pocket pairs, and when he re-raises me, he always has aces and kings and ace king. But
Right.
if you're playing against a guy who's just 3-betting you all the time, it's really hard to put him on a range in the first place. And
Right.
the more confused your opponent is, the more mistakes they're going to make against you.
I imagine then after like an hour or two of me just 3-bet or folding, like in position and stuff like that, people would either open less or they're going to start making mistakes because they're going to get frustrated that they're always getting 3-bet when they open up.
Yeah, exactly, right? There's definitely times where people just get frustrated, and then I see them suddenly try to get it all in with pocket eights, right? Because they think, oh wow, he's so aggressive, it must be fine to get in pocket eights, not really realizing that, yes, I'm 3-betting you very aggressively, but when all of the money goes in, I'm going to show you the goods the overwhelming majority of the time.
So like a quick tangent here, say the middle position opens, right?
Okay.
And then I 3-bet him with, like you said, ace 10 suited. Okay. And now he calls, so that we're going heads up. Flop comes like king 7-4.
Yes, amazing situation for you.
Is this something I'm betting like 25% pot on when he checks?
I'm probably going to be betting a third of the pot here, but 100% of the time, right? And there's nothing that your opponent can do about this, even from a theoretical perspective, right? If you held a sign over your head that said, I'm going to bet 1/3 pot here, right? Mm-hmm. And your opponent has a hand like, pocket sixes, he still should fold that hand, right? Which is kind of, mind-blowing to think about, because your range in general is just going to be so much stronger than his on a king high board, right? Like even if you're betting your entire range and he has like a hand like pocket sixes or like second pair, he's still going to run into all your like pocket nines, pocket eights, pocket tens that all 3-bet pre-flop, because you're putting all of those into your 3-bet range, right? So
and then so I feel like this is a situation that people get stuck in a lot. So like say then he calls the flop, right? And the turn comes another like relative blank, like a 5 or a 6, maybe it puts 2 cards in a row, but not anything like important. He checks again. Is this something that we need to be continuing to put pressure on because we're going to have better kings in our range there? Or after him calling us on the flop, I feel like people get in this weird situation where they're thinking, oh, he probably has a king if he's calling me here. I need to shut down. So in your opinion, do
Yeah.
I need to keep firing there, or is that something where you kind of shut down a good percentage of the
So
time?
a lot of this is often going to depend on exactly what hand I have, because I want to think about my blocker properties. That is, the hand I have influences the hand that my opponent can have, because he can't have, whatever things I represent, right? So on a king high board, let's say that I really think that my opponent is going to call me down when he has king queen and king jack, right? Hard for him to have ace king because he did not 4-bet me pre-flop, right?
Right.
So if I somehow get to the turn or the river in the scenario and I have queen jack, right? That's often going to take out 25 to 40% of the hands that my opponent can actually call me down with by the river. So what happens is, if I bet the flop and bet the turn, now when I get to the river and I hold queen jack, it's going to mean that my opponent is going to show up with second pair or pocket nines way more often. And so then I know, oh, wow, if this guy's going to have pocket nines or pocket tens, way more often, he's not going to have a king a lot, then I can just go ahead and keep blasting here. So very often in a 3-bet pot, I'm looking at my hand, if I don't have, if I have nothing, and I say, how many top pair type hands am I blocking, right? If I'm blocking a ton of them, then I just want to just go ahead and keep putting on the pressure, right? I think what's really important to think about is, if you bet really small on the flop, your opponent is going to have to call you with a bunch of like random things, right? Like if it's a king 7-2 board and you bet 1/3, he's going to have to call you with like all of his sevens, all of his like pocket jacks, pocket tens, nines, eights, etc. He's going to have to call you with like some ace queen of hearts if there's like a heart on the board, right? And so because he has to float you out of position with so many hands, it's going to be really hard for him to construct a range in such a way that if you bet small on the flop and then keep betting on the turn, he's going to be able to defend that accurately. Yeah. So I think in general, I think it's possible at the small stakes, never quote me on this, if you just always bet when your opponent checks to you, you might just be able to run everyone over. I don't think that's the most profitable way to play. There's probably better ways to play that. But I think it actually might be the case that if you just bet blindly when people turn their hands face up, they just cannot beat you.
Interesting.
Right? So like,
and then real quickly, what kind of a sizing do you prefer on a turn?
I usually like to, after I bet 1/3 on the flop, size in a way that is going to be able to put in a pot-sized river bet, right? So very often I like to go like 1/3 on the flop, 50% on the turn, and then on the river it's going to be like 75 to 85%, right? And so when your opponent gets to the river, right, and he has to call whatever 75 or 85% all in, I mean, then he's going to often feel extremely committed to a lot of hands and is just going to have to, like pay you off. So
nice.
The third mistake is one of the most subtle ones. And I think that it's one of the most mind-blowing ones that a lot of people just do not realize is theoretically good and actually genuinely crushing in live games, right? This is one of the techniques that I think is one of my bread and butters in extracting money from fish. And that is what I like to call monkey in the middle, which is if I raise pre-flop and I get called by a guy who is in position from me and out of position to me. So like if I raise in the cutoff and then the button and the big blind calls, right? On, I would say 90% of flops, I'm going to check my entire range on the flop.
Wow.
Okay. The few flops that I think that you should bet, and maybe 90% is a little high, 85%, a huge amount. The flops I'm going to bet are often ones where neither the button or the big blind can have two pairs in sets. So for example, I raise in the cutoff and the flop comes ace king 9, right? And the button and the big blind called me. Almost none of those players can have ace king, right? It's possible the button can't have ace 9. It's possible that the big blind can't have pocket nines either, right? So no one can have any part of this board except for you as the raiser. So you're kind of incentivized to put in a little bit of money, right? But if the flop comes like ace 6-2 on the flop, I think a lot of people make this horrible mistake when they have ace king of just being like, cool, I have a good ace, I'm just going to go ahead and bet here. While I check ace king there a bajillion % of the time, right? And one of the big reasons is if I bet ace king and the button calls me, and let's say the big blind folds, right? And let's say whatever, the flop and turn comes, doesn't really matter what it comes. If I keep betting there and I bet large, my opponent is almost always going to show me a set or a two pair, right? It's just going to be a fact of when I raise in the cutoff and the button calls me, he has what I like to call a narrower range than I do, right? When I raise in the cutoff, I'm raising like 25% of hands, 30% of hands. When a guy calls me on the button, very often he has like 5 to 10% of hands, right? So if his range is narrower than mine, he's going to have a higher proportion of these really, really strong hands to me. And so if a guy has a higher proportion of strong hands to me, I'm not very incentivized to bet anything against him, right? So very often if I have ace king, I just start with a check. And so a lot of people are like, oh, but what happens if the guy has ace queen and you might lose money from him? But then do I really lose money? Because if I check ace king there and the guy has ace queen, he thinks ace queen's good, right? So he's just going to go for 3 streets and I'm going to call him 3 times and be like ace king. And he's going to make a face at me and call me a scrub. That's how that works, right? So like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I might lose money against second best hands, but like that dude realizes he's got a second best hand too. He's just going to bet that shit himself, right? Yeah. But what it does mean is that when the guy has pocket sixes, right, I don't get into a really gross spot where all the money goes in. I don't play for 4 streets of value, right? I can just go check call, and lose half my stack instead of my entire stack.
Are you ever, by that logic, are you ever check raising either on the flop or turn?
I am, yeah. So like if the flop is like, ace high and I have ace king, yeah, check raising the flop is not bad, right? Because very often when your opponent, when you check raise on the flop, a lot of opponents just don't give you credit and they just try to hero you really hard. I think this is extra true in live. There's been a lot of spots where I'm monkey in the middle, the button bets, the big blind calls, and then I raise with like medium set on the flop, and no one is ever believing me because all they will ever say is, oh, that guy's got a gut shot. Oh, that guy always has like a spade draw, right? So like if the board's like ace king, ace 6-2, and there's 2 spades on there, and if you get to squeeze the flop against 2 guys, right, like they're always going to be putting you on either like a way too strong hand or always putting you on exactly a draw, right? And then you're like, oh, I've a set of 6s. Right. And this is like a spot where just like 3-betting pre-flop, I just like to put a ton of hands into one action, right? Realizing I'm not going to lose a ton of money by putting all my money into like a bet on the flop or a check on the flop. So when I just check my entire range on the flop, right, I don't lose any money, but then I get all this information where I get to see, oh, the button's going to bet. Oh, the button checks through, and then the big blind checks to me. And now I get to see, oh, wow, everyone is a coward and has no interest in this pot. Now I can steal it, right? So like this is also like super killer in MTTs, right? Where very often you really don't like bluffing the flop multi-way, right? Especially because in MTTs, you're really incentivized to not lose chips, right? Like it's more important to not lose chips than to win chips. And so very often if it just checks through the flop and you bet really small on the flop or on the turn, oh God. Right? You just steal people's souls. It's amazing. Right?
Nice. I feel like I'm a crusher already now.
Yeah. I think if you just do these things, right, this will be big. And so like if we look at one of your YouTube hands, right? Sent me a bunch of hands from the Wynn, and there's a hand where you let's see. What do we do? Okay. We raise pocket 8s under the gun. Okay. Right? Yep. And we get called by a bunch of people both in and out of position to us. And the flop comes 7-2-2 and you bet small. Right? And this is a spot where I'm very sure a lot of people just bet because they're like, oh, I really, really, really don't want to get any action. Right? Like I just want everyone to go away and I just want to win this pot. And I'm cool with that.
Right.
But the problem is all the times you actually bet and you get called, you're just dead. You just lit that money on fire. Right? Because after you get called multiple times and the flop comes 7-2-2, when you actually get action, it's from pocket 9s, pocket 7s, or a 2. That's it. Right? When there's 4 people in the pot and you bet really small, no one's calling you with pocket 5s. Right? And so very often the best way to play the hand is to check on the flop and see what everyone else does and then make a decision. Right?
I think in the moment there, if I'm going over my logic out loud, I was thinking exactly what you were saying. I have pocket 8s here and I got called in 3 spots. And we're 4 ways or 5 ways to the flop. Actually, I got called in 4 spots. So I'm like, okay, someone's got king jack, someone's got king queen, someone's got like ace 10. You know, they got all these hands here, and like I'm not sure how to proceed on turns when an ace through a 10 come off. So my logic was, let's bet here and try to fold out some hands and protect my hand. But you're saying because I'm out of position and it's so many people, I need to be just checking here and proceed.
And so here's how to make that easier.
Right.
Okay, getting to the turn and an overcard comes, that's a horrible spot, right? But think about it like this. I'm checking pocket eights in that spot. That also means I'm checking all of my ace, king, and ace, queen, right?
Okay.
So I'm checking all my ace, king, and ace, queen, and then the turn comes through and it comes an ace.
So you're thinking in terms of my entire range instead of just pocket ace. That's something that I've noticed I need
so instead of focusing on the exact pocket eights,
right?
If you think about your entire strategy.
An ace through a 10 on the turn, because I was the pre-flop raiser, actually is a very good card for me.
Yeah.
Therefore, I need to stop thinking, okay, I have eights here. I need to think, what should I do with my entire range and not specifically eights? And with my entire range, I'm going to be missing this board like a huge portion of the time. So I need to be checking so that way I'm not really scared of many turns in terms of my entire range.
Yeah. And so, yeah, if you always can think about your strategy and your entire range, you realize, oh, I don't have to make crazy hero calls with pocket eights here, because I'll be able to just like have pocket, you know, I'll have like ace jack there, right? I'll have, you know, quad deuces, or, you know, like a full house that I checked on the flop and I checked on the turn as well, right? So yeah, if you just check your entire range, you protect yourself from getting bluffed down the road, because you can show up on the turn in the river with all these other hands that you could not show up with before.
That makes sense. Okay.
So later on in the video, you raise ace 3, and I think you get called in a couple spots, and then you check
clubs. Yeah, I see that hand.
Yeah, and so you check when it comes 3-3-2, right? I think that is an excellent check, right? One, you should not have that many threes in your range, right? So possibly showing up with ace 3 here is just very, very, you know, surprising. But what this also does is it protects you from, when you check, from people just blasting at you, right? Because this is going to be a spot where if I'm paying a lot of attention to my opponents and they all just keep checking to me and they all just always are giving up when they all check to me, I'm just going to start blasting them when they show weakness, right? And as we talked about slightly earlier, that might just defeat everyone, right? And so when you get to like higher stakes, you should often be checking there simply because people are going to be like, oh, wow, everyone's weak. I'm just going to start blasting, right? And people are like, oh, you know, that's only for higher stakes. But trust me, there's a plenty of time where I'm just like randomly playing, you know, 1-3 or 2-5 with friends so it comes to the casino, and I check 3 times to a guy, and on the river he blastos on me, right? Because like, oh, it's that aggressive guy that he's been 3-betting me all night. Fuck him, right? Like, let's go. And I'm like, bottom trips, right? Like, and then it just, you know, I just try to always, you know, if I'm thinking about my strategy in a big cohesive way, it really makes a lot of my play a lot easier, because I don't have to worry so much about like figuring out where I hero call people down. You know what I mean? Like with that eights hand, like I never have to hero call anyone down if I can recognize that when I get to the turn, I have all my pocket aces. I have all my pocket kings, right? So I can show up with very, very strong hands.
Right. That's something I need to think more about.
Yeah. So I think these are the 3 main things that if you add to your game overnight, right? Not to borrow from Overnight Monster, right? But overnight, these will add huge, huge gains to your win rate, right? Like these are really, I think, some of the basic techniques a lot of people, when they develop, instantaneously move from like 1-3 to 2-5 or 2-5 to 5-10. Because like once you get these huge leaks out of your game and you're playing against people who still have them, suddenly your edge against them becomes like 20 big blinds per 100 or something like really astronomical, right? Or like, I mean, 20 might be low, because like, you know, at live, when you play live, I think it's possible to have like a 20 big blind per hour win rate if you're like quite solid. Like at 1-3, I think it's very easy to have like a $50 or $60 win rate if you just play perfectly, right? But even at like 2-5, you can probably get up to like, you know, like $75 to $100 an hour, mostly just focusing on just keeping up the aggression and then having these kind of more like balanced, you know, monkey in the middle kind of strategies.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think one of the things that my viewers might be concerned about, so say they're like a 1-3 player, they do well using these like new topics and making their game better, and then
Sure.
they make a jump to 2-5, and they bring these same principles there. I think because 2-5 is a better player pool, although it is crushable, it is a better player pool, and there are more thinking players. So I think people like I'm speaking from experience. I've gotten into some situations where I do 3-bet pre and I get called, and then I'm kind of in this territory where I haven't studied enough about post flop play, and I get in situations where I miss the flop. I maybe take a C bet, and then on the turn, I get called, and then the turn, here comes like a more experienced player, and they smell weakness if I check back, then they bomb river. There's situations that arise in like the higher stakes games sometimes that
Sure.
I think are minus EV, and like I would lose an advantage even after doing these great things like folding and 3-betting and just stuff like that. I find myself in big pots on turns where if I'm connected with the board, I pretty much know what to do. But when I'm missing boards and not picking up equity, sometimes I find myself kind of confused in certain situations. So
Sure.
is there any like main things you can point out in terms of not being intimidated by
Well,
better
I think
players
that
and better turn play and stuff like that?
yeah, I think that one thing is that a lot of people don't realize that when you take a strategy where you let me start like this. When people learn classic poker betting strategy, they're like large bets on the flop or check, right? Like 2/3, 3/4 or check, right? And so when you play a strategy like that, your continuation betting percentages from street to street should be like 60%, 50%, 50%, right? Or like 55, 55, 55, right? But when you play this style where you bet really small on the flop a huge percentage of the time, your continuation bet is going to look a lot more like 75 to 80%, and then go to 40%, and then go back up to like 50 or 60%, right? So you have to recognize very often you are going to be checking back the turn, right? And then if you play the turn in a balanced way so that you just sometimes check back top pair weak kicker, right? Top pair medium kicker. And you can say to yourself when you get to the river, oh, I have top pair weak kicker here, so I don't have to hero call him with like fourth pair that often. Then you don't have to, then the spot doesn't become as complex, right? So like, especially in 3-bet pots, I think that a very small amount of study, a couple lessons that we can talk about some theoretical topics, will make that much easier for you. But in general, what I like to think is, if I just keep betting small, one, right, and it's hard to see this as a live player, but in the long run, that is just so absolutely crushing that even if I completely misplay the turn in the river, I'm probably going to be doing very, very well, right? Two, if your strategy mostly is I'm going to put in, big amounts of money with big hands on the turn in the river and 3-bet pots, that's probably going to be absolutely just fine, right? Like, it's really, I think, a mistake as players move up that they think, oh, I need to add these elements to my game, right? The fact of the matter is my default strategy against both small stakes and high stakes players is almost exactly the same, right? It's until they show me something crazy, then I'll begin adjusting, right? So like, I would not be intimidated at between the leap from 1-3 to 2-5. I think that's more a leap where players study more, but they still study really bad material, right? So like, if they're all studying really bad things, it doesn't really matter that they study more. All of their ranges are still going to be bad. All their basic strategies are still going to, be
Right.
complete nonsense, right? Like, they're not actually going to give you more difficulty unless you imagine that they're going to, and then you believe in that, right? Poker is a game where it's so easy to always think there's monsters under the bed. Oh man, I moved up a limit. I need to play wilder, right? This was like a huge leap that one of my students had, is that he made the leap from like 200 to 500 and 1,000. And when he was playing in those games, despite them being juicy and full of fish, he was just playing so wild and reckless because he's like, oh, this is how 5-10 players play. That's not right. That's a complete myth. That's not how like professional players approach the game. So yeah, I would say 1-3 and 2-5. If you have like solid baseline strategies, are the exact same skill pool, right? Like, the argument is, I bet 1/3 on the flop, right? The math and study that you need to come up with the correct defense against that from like a game theoretical perspective requires you to own a computer, a solver, know how to use it, know how to study it, turn those outputs into executionable strategies, right? Do you think the people at 2-5 are doing that way more often than 1-3?
Right.
Hell no. Right?
So let's flip that the other way around then. So say like someone does bet small on the flop. What's like a couple things right off the bat that you're gonna tell me right now that I can do? Like
Okay.
I face someone like a Rampage
Sure.
Poker, someone that
Okay.
studying a little bit here,
Yeah.
and they bet that quarter to third size on the pot. I gotta
Sure.
continue what, like second pairs, like what do I gotta be doing on the flop here?
Okay. Whenever a guy bets really small, right? The minimum hand that I'm probably going to defend there is having two backdoor flush draws. Oh, I'm sorry, two backdoor draws.
Okay.
So if the flop is Jack 8-3 with one spade, right? I'm probably going to continue with Queen 2 of spades. Right? So I should be calling extremely wide there, right? If I have a hand that can improve to a draw if I have 15 outs to a draw, I'm probably going to be calling the flop.
At the minimum, yeah.
Yes, right? So I'm going to be calling a ton of like 7 high type hands, right? And then I just intend to, if my opponent bets on the turn, fold all of those hands, right? Like if they're unapproved. And then when my opponent checks back the turn, maul him, right? Just like I'll just bet small a lot and then have them fold because they turn their hand face up, or just over bet when I smell too much weakness.
Okay, and as they size up on the flop though, so say it's not 33%, so as they go like 50% and like 60% of the pot,
the more I begin to tighten up my requirements there. Yeah. So for example, there might be spots where if a guy bets 1/3, and the board's like ace 10-4. So ace 10-4 is a board that has high and low gut shots, right? Like 5-3 and queen jack, right? So when my opponent bets 1/3, I might always call with all gut shots, right? All 100% of them. If my opponent bets like pot, I might now only call with the gut shots to the high nuts instead of the low nuts, right? Yeah. So like I upgrade in my mind how good those hands have to be, right? There's going to be a bunch of spots where sometimes, like if there's 2 spades on the flop and a guy bets 1/3 and I have ace 10 off suit, I'll call if either one of those cards is a spade when he bets small. But if he bets larger, he bets 2/3, now this might be a spot where I'm only going to call with ace 10 of spades, or with the ace of spades.
Ace of spades, right?
Right. Yeah. So that basically, the difference is one is drawing to a 10 high draw, right? Which has more value when your opponent is betting small on the flop, right? Like somehow backdooring to the 10 high draw is probably going to be pretty strong, versus when your opponent goes like pot, you probably need to show up with the nut flush on the river, right? Like when it sizes up. So
that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. So I think that, if you go back and look at some of your own videos, you'll quickly be able to see all of the spots where you're like, oh, I should have done this, right? I think we were just talking about your biggest cash out at the Wynn, right? Was another spot where I was like, I disagree with 90% of these, right? So hopefully this will clear up some of those ideas, and you'll really be putting on the gas even the next time you sit down, right? I expect that these are going to be mistakes that you will never make in your lifetime again, unless you do stuff where you say, I know I was giving you shit for this, and I know that there's a delay on your videos, so obviously sometimes the coaching I give you,
couple ones are from a month ago, so
yeah, exactly. But there was a hand where you look down, you're like, I have ace jack off suit, and you go, I know my coach says I shouldn't call this, but I'm going to call this. And obviously it's because, like this was from a couple months ago, but future videos, we're going to see vast improvements. And you, the viewer, you got to keep Wolfgang, you got to keep him honest.
You got to keep me
right? Like, oh man, you keep limping. Didn't you hear Alvin teaches poker? He said, raise these fools.
Except I think they have an interest though to see crazy hands sometimes. That's why I'll spice it up sometimes and do something like really stupid.
Oh, you'll get...
Sometimes stupid things make for good videos.
I think a lot of people don't realize that poker by nature is so stupid that you will just get into like absolute shenanigans by just playing if you play, if you monkey in the middle, you're going to get into some interesting spots just because that's like a line that a lot of people haven't seen. So like, I wouldn't worry about getting into like fun spots for viewers, because I like, as Ben Sulsky once said, the legend Sauce123 once said, when you play against low stakes players, every day is an adventure, right? It's always like going to a theme park. You have no idea, right? It's gonna be ups and downs. It's just complete craziness. You get some cotton candy. It's good times.
Yeah, especially in California.
Yeah. So
Good
hopefully I will be seeing you out in Vegas pretty soon. I'm gonna be heading up there in a couple of weeks, and definitely gonna be moving out there for the World Series this year. So let's
I try to
get
yeah,
that
I
crush.
might even go out there for the online portion because I can't play in California, so we'll see.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So important that we get these live skills together so that by September, right, be ready to play get some bracelets, right? It's time to go jewelry hunting.
All right, Alvin, thank you for these tips. I hope you guys got some valuable information about this.
Yeah, no doubt, man.
Check the link in the description. Alvin has a very valuable course, and I have a discount code, so you get 10% off if you click that link. Definitely check it out. Alvin's a great guy, and I'll see you guys as always in the next video. Thanks for always watching. Peace.